Rabotai, today we're going to learn chapter 9 of the book of Samuel 2, volume 2. I need to just mention one thing. That's going to be the last shiur about the book of Samuel, the book of Samuel for the Gregorian year. From next week, I'm going to start doing a shiur on to prepare us for Hanukkah, because next Sunday is going to be Erev Hanukkah, so we most probably going to do the shiur a bit. No, it's not going to be Erev Hanukkah, so it's going to give us some time. Yeah, it's going to give us some time to prepare us for Hanukkah, Be'ezrat Hashem. So with no further talking, we're going to do chapter 9 tonight. But first, I would like to do a revision on chapter 8. What did we learn in chapter 8 in the book of Samuel 2? At the beginning of chapter 8, we learn that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the prophet Natan HaNavi, to go to David HaMelech and to tell him that he's not going to build Bet HaMikdash. And the reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent Natan HaNavi early in the morning, it's because that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that if you wait a little bit more, David HaMelech going to already start moving on the building of Bet HaMikdash. So therefore, what is he done? He came to Natan HaNavi at night and he said to him, listen, you must go the following morning to David HaMelech and tell him that he's not building Bet HaMikdash. David HaMelech, when he heard that, you would expect to see David HaMelech disappointed, cross, angry. Yes, David HaMelech was disappointed, but he had a different reaction. When David HaMelech heard that he can't build Bet HaMikdash, first thing that he done, he thanked the Almighty for all the goodness that he done for him and helped him in the past. And he thanks HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all the abundance and the goodness that he's going to do with him for the future. And not only that, David HaMelech thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu that helped him to overcome his enemy and the enemy of the children of Israel and to win the war against them. Further on in a chapter, we see something very interesting. It said that David, the prophet, actually telling us about the war of David HaMelech against his enemy, and especially say his enemy, not only the enemy of Israel. And I have to explain what I must say. David HaMelech, when he fought with Moab, David HaMelech actually took a personal revenge against the Moabim. Why? Because the king of Moab killed his father and his mother and all of his brother, except one little brother that managed to escape. And when David HaMelech waited for that moment to take a revenge against the king of Moab that killed his family. David HaMelech also fought with Aram Damascus, Hadar Ezer, Edom, and etc. That means that David HaMelech here, we learn that he didn't fight only against the, against the enemy of his special, the enemy of the Jewish people. David HaMelech also fought against the enemy of Israel and his personal enemy. Later on, David HaMelech, the prophet explained that David HaMelech, after he win all of this war, he take all the gold, the silver, the copper. We explained that it's actually right to say first silver, then gold, and then copper. Why? Because at that time, the price of the silver was much higher than a gold. Later on in stage of life, it's changed that the gold had much better value than the silver. David HaMelech took all the spoil, all the money, all the gold, all the silver, all the copper, and given it and designated to build Bet HaMikdash. All the spoil that David HaMelech took from all the enemy of the Jewish people and all the tax that he took, it was only to build Bet HaMikdash. Towards the end of chapter 8, the prophet described that David HaMelech actually now appointing roles. Each one have his own role, who gonna be who in the kingdom of Israel. That means that David HaMelech, we know that he put, for example, Yoav, that was his nephew, to become the chief of staff in charge about the army. Okay? We know that David HaMelech given each one a role that in his position, for example, we say that the Kohanim have their own position and etc. That's how chapter 8 ended. Now we're going to start chapter 9. That was introduction to chapter 8, so we know what we are in chapter 9. In chapter 9, in verse 1, the prophet tells us like this: ויאמר דוד, הכי יש עוד אשר נותר לבית שאול, ואעשה עמו חסד בעבור יונתן.
David inquired, "Is there anyone else who has survived the house of Saul, so that I may deal kindly with him for the sake of Jonathan?"
Okay, we have to explain here what's happening. David HaMelech asked his ministers, tell me, is anyone left from the house of Saul? We know that when Shaul HaMelech, Saul, King Saul, when he fought with the Plishtim, we explained that they killed King Saul. Not only that they hang him and his son on a wall in Bet Sha'an. Remember, we explained that. And David HaMelech, before that, he make a covenant with Yonatan. He make a covenant with Yonatan that when he gonna be a king, he took an oath to Yonatan that he will look after their family. And now that David HaMelech become a king and already his authority all over Israel, he wanted to fulfill that oath that he given Yehonatan, the son of Shaul. Said the prophet that David HaMelech asked the minister, listen, does anyone know what's happened with the children of King Saul? Because I promised to Yonatan that I will look after his family. So we see from it, sorry, I'm yawning. We see from here that David HaMelech wanted to fulfill the promise that he promised to Yonatan. So what he done? He asked his minister. And let's look at verse 2, what the prophet tells us. ולבית שאול עבד ושמו צביה, ויקראו לו אל דוד, ויאמר המלך דוד אליו, האתה ציווה, ויאמר עבדך.
The house of Saul had a servant named Ziba, and they summoned him to David. The king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he answered, "I am your servant."
We have to understand what's happening in this verse. David HaMelech heard that the house of Shaul have a servant by the name of Ziba. And David HaMelech asked to call him, to bring him in the front of him. And David HaMelech interrogated him. What did he say to him? Are you Tziva? The Mefarshim asked, why is David HaMelech asked Tziva if he's Tziva? What difference does it make? They told him that he's Tziva. Said the Malbin. The Malbin was Rabbi Meir Libush Ben Yehiel Michael Weiser. He born 216 years ago in Ukraine. And the Malbin explained, you know why David HaMelech asked Tziva if he's Tziva? He said that in their time used to be a custom that the servant, those that was slave, used to change their real name, okay? And David HaMelech wanted to know, is that Tziva that used to work for Shaul HaMelech or not? Is that was the servant of David of Shaul HaMelech or not? That's why David HaMelech interrogating Tziva. Okay? Who was Tziva? Tziva was a Evet Knaani, a Canaanite slave. Okay? That Shaul HaMelech took him and he became a slave to the house of Shaul. We'll explain what it means to the house of Shaul shortly. But there is another question that we have to understand. Why David HaMelech summons Tziva? He asked, is there is any member of the house of Shaul still alive? Why are you calling the servant? So the Mefarshim explain that after Shaul HaMelech died, and also Ishboshet, okay, got killed, been murdered, the member that belonged to Shaul HaMelech, the people that was from the descendants of Shaul HaMelech, gone underground, start to hide. They all hide in all different places. And David HaMelech knew it, but he didn't know how to get hold of them. Therefore, that David HaMelech asked his ministers, anyone know, is anyone from the house of Shaul HaMelech is still alive? So they told him that the servant Tziva, we know about the servant Tziva, we can ask him and he will have to give us the answer. After all, he's a Canaanite slave, and when he comes to the king, he understands that if you're not going to give the right information, you know, David HaMelech can easily kill them. Because in their time, Rabota, I need to explain something very important. The authority that the king had, it's not the authority of the Beit Din. The king had extra authority above the Beit Din. So people really have a lot of fear from the king. So that's why David HaMelech summons Tziva to come to him. And Tziva, as we explained, he was a Canaanite slave that was in the house of Shaul. What does it mean in the house of Shaul? It means that he was like in charge about all the other servants. He was a servant by himself, but he was in charge about all the other servants that was in the house of Shaul HaMelech. And that's what David HaMelech, and that's what the prophets say about Tziva. David HaMelech summons him to come to see him so he can ask him about the people or the member of the house of Shaul. And verse 3, ויאמר המלך, האפס עוד איש לבית שאול, ויעשה עמו חסד אלוהים, ויאמר ציווה אל המלך, עוד בן ליהונתן נכה רגליים.
Sorry. The king said to him, Siva, are you Siva? And he answered, sorry, I am your servant. The king said, is there any man at all left in the house of Saul so that I may perform godly kindness with him. Ziba said to the king, there remains a son of Jonathan, whose legs are crippled.
What's happening here? David HaMelech said to Ziba, is anyone left from the house of Shaul HaMelech, from the descendants of Shaul HaMelech? Because I want to make with him a godly mercy, kindness. What means godly kindness? Say the Mefarshim that here David HaMelech saying to Ziba, I want to do a great kindness with those members of Shaul that's still alive. Okay? What is Ziba answering? Ziba said to him, yes, there is a son to Yehonatan. Yehonatan have a son, okay, that he's still alive, but he's crippled on his legs. The Malbim explained that here, that by that Ziba saying that Yehonatan have a son, okay, but he's crippled on his legs. You see, if you look carefully, the prophet put the emphasis on it. And he said that Ziba said that he's crippled on his legs. We have to understand what does it mean. Say the Malbim that here Ziba trying to hint to David HaMelech that the son of Yehonatan, okay, is not deserving, or he can't take any role in a government. Why? Because he's handicapped with his leg. We have to understand why it's mean that we say Hesed Elokim. What it means Hesed Elokim? Great kindness. The Radak, Rabbi David Kimhi, he born in France 865 years ago. He said that, you know why David HaMelech wanted to do a great kindness, okay, or God kindness with the children of Yonatan? Because David HaMelech and Yonatan, before they gone to war, before David HaMelech fled, if you remember, David HaMelech took an oath, and he promised Yonatan that whoever going to stay alive, they have a deal, they going to look after the family. After that, again, Yonatan came to David HaMelech, and he said to him, you're going to be a king one day. Don't forget your promise. David HaMelech, now that been appointed as a king, as a leader of the Jewish people, he wanted to fulfill that oath that was between him and Yonatan, because it was a godly, that they took it in the name of the Almighty. Say the Malbim, that's why David HaMelech say something very important. Hesed Elokim. What it means, Hesed Elokim? Godly kindness. That means because the oaths that they took in the name of the Almighty, and the Malbim explain what does it mean, godly? It means great, big. David HaMelech gonna do a great kindness with the people and the descendants of Shaul HaMelech. In verse 4, Vayomer lo HaMelech. איפה הוא? ויאמר ציווה אל המלך, הנה הוא בבית מכיר בן עמיאל, בלו דבר.
Okay. The king said, where is he? And Ziba said to the king, behold, he is in the house of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lodebar.
Okay, what's happened here? The prophet in this verse described that David HaMelech asked Siva, where is the son of Yehonatan? Okay? And Siva said to him that he's in the house of Makir ben Amiel in a place that's called Ludavar. Okay, we have to understand, the Malvin explained that Mepiboshet, that was his name, the son of Yonatan, hid because he was frightened. He was hid in a house of Makir ben Amiel because he was worried. Okay? Why? Because Mepiboshet was worried that now David HaMelech going to look for him and he's going to kill all the descendants of Shaul. Because they was thinking, because their grandfather all the time tried to kill David HaMelech, they was frightened that now David HaMelech going to take revenge against them. So they was hiding. Chazal explained, why did they call him Mepiboshet? Okay? He said that, Chazal explained like this, that, you know why they call him Mepiboshet? Because his real name, Merav Baal Mepiboshet. But why they call him Mepiboshet? Chazal say שהיה מבייש פניו של דוד המלך בהלכה. That mean that handicap, Mepiboshet, was a great Talmid Chacham. That when he was sitting and studying halacha with David HaMelech later on, every time that David HaMelech says something not right, he used to correct him in the halacha. That means that Mepiboshet, that he used to embarrass David in the halacha. He was such a great Talmid Chacham. What's happened with him? We have to explain, and I forget to explain, why did Shiva say to David HaMelech that Yonatan had a son that is handicapped on his leg? What's happened? If you remember, in a war that was between the Plishtim and Shaul HaMelech, the Plishtim win. And it caused a big chaos in the house of Israel. People were so worried in the house of Shaul that the children of Israel all fled. The house of Shaul, when I say the house of Shaul, the descendants of Shaul HaMelech, when they hear that the Plishtim win the war, they was worried that now they're going to take a revenge against the king of Israel. Shaul HaMelech have his family not far from him. Yonatan have a little baby at that time when he gone to war. But he have also a maid servant. And the maid servant, when she heard that the Plishtim coming, immediately that she picked up Mepiboshet, she held them in her hand and she will start running. But she didn't take notice and she tripped over a stone, is not sure what, and Mepiboshet fell. He was a baby, and she fell. They fell both. She was holding him. They both fell. And because he was a baby and she was holding him, she fell straight forward. And since then, Mepiboshet became a handicap. That means that she ran. She was worried about Mepiboshet, that the Plishtim going to come and kill him. So she was so much in a rush to fled. She tripped over, some people say, over a piece of wood, some people say a stone, and she fall on Mepiboshet himself, and that's how he became a handicap. Okay? And that's why Tziva telling David HaMelech that Shaul have a son, his name is Mepiboshet, but he's a handicap in his leg. Okay, until here we understand. Let's go to verse 5. וישלח המלך דוד, ויקחו מבית מכיר בן עמיאל מלוא דבר.
King David
מלוא דבר.
sent and had him brought from the house of Machir, son of Amiel, from Lodevar.
Okay. David HaMelech sent people to fetch Mephibosheth. Why? Because we explained that Mephibosheth himself couldn't, because he was handicapped, so he couldn't run. So what's happened? Mephibosheth himself needed to send people, okay, so he can bring him to him, because David HaMelech wanted to speak with Mephibosheth. So what David HaMelech has done, he sent people to the house of Makir ben Amiel, to Melo Davar, that's the place called Melo Davar, to fetch Mephibosheth. In verse 6, ויבוא מפיבושת בן יונתן בן שאול אל דוד, ויפול על פניו וישתחו, ויאמר דוד מפיבושת, וישתחו, ויאמר דוד מפיבושת, ויאמר אני עבדך.
Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came before David and fell upon his face and prostrated himself. David said, "Are you Mephibosheth?" And he said, "Behold, I am your servant."
Okay, what's happening here? In this verse, the prophet described that Mephibosheth arrived at the house of David HaMelech, okay, and he castrated himself and he bowed down to David HaMelech. And David HaMelech called him in his name, Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth answered him that he is his servant. The Metzudot David, Rabbi David Altshela. Rabbi David Altshela, born 338 years ago in Galicia. And he said by that Mephibosheth say that he's the servant of David HaMelech. He say, you know what does it mean? That here Mephibosheth saying to David HaMelech that he will accept any punishment that David HaMelech will punish him, okay? Because Mephibosheth was thinking that David HaMelech now, that he get hold of him, he gonna take revenge against the household of Shaul HaMelech. That means the descendants of Shaul HaMelech, because Shaul HaMelech all the time wanted to kill David HaMelech. So Mephibosheth was thinking that now David HaMelech going to take revenge, okay? And he going to kill him. Why? Because he was a descendant of the king Saul. So say Rabbi David Altshela, by that he said that he's his servant, he accepted his kingship, okay? But he also accept any punishment. Let's look what David HaMelech say in verse 7. ויאמר לו דוד, אל תירא.
Rabbi Levy, he was his grandson, Shaul's grandson.
נכון, נכון, the son of Jonathan. What did I say? Did I say something else?
No, he says the grandson of King Saul.
Ken, he was the grandson of King Saul. He was the son of Yehonatan. Mephibosheth was the son of Yonatan, the grandson of Shaul.
Right,
yes,
right.
Yes. Okay. ויאמר לו דוד, אל תירא, כי אעשה עמך חסד, בעבור יהונתן אביך, והשיבותי לך את כל שדה שאול אביך, ואתה תאכל לחם על שולחני תמיד.
David told him, "Fear not, for I shall surely deal kindly with you, for the sake of your father Jonathan. I shall return to you the entire estate of your father Saul, and you shall eat bread, my table continually."
What's happening here? Here, David HaMelech saying to Mephibosheth, you have nothing to fear. You know why you have nothing to fear? Because I will do kindness with you, because my oath that I took, me and Jonathan, we took an oath one to each other to look after the descendants of the family if one of something happened to one of us. So you have nothing to fear, okay? And I'm going to do a great kindness with you because you're the son of Jonathan, okay? Not only that, I'm going to do great kindness with you. We have to understand what does it mean, great kindness. So the Metudot David explained that here David HaMelech actually saying that he's going to do two different kindness with Mephibosheth. The first one, I'm going to read David HaMelech saying to Mephibosheth, I will return all the field that I took after the death of Ishbosheth. And we have to understand what's happening. Ishbosheth was the son of Shaul HaMelech. After he been killed by his two officers, David HaMelech immediately took all the field of Shaul HaMelech. Why did he take him? Because David HaMelech say, Shaul have no more son. He have only one daughter. Who's his daughter? Michal. He married to Michal. In that case, im en banim habat yoreshet. If there is no boys, the daughter inherited. And I'm married to Michal, the daughter of Shaul. Therefore, I'm going to inherit all of those inheritance. There's no one else to take it. Now David HaMelech coming to Mephibosheth. And he said, all of those fields that I took, because I was thinking that there's no more member from the descendants of Shaul, I realized that you are the son of Jonathan. That means that you are from descendants of Shaul. All of those fields, you deserve to take it. Why? Because there is a male. Nachon that my wife was a daughter, but a Yerusha olechet laben. The heritage going to the son. Therefore, the first thing that I'm doing, all of that field that I took from your grandfather, it say here, your father, Shaul Avicha. That means your father, Shaul, but he's referring that he's your older father, that means the grandfather. I'm returning back to you. All of the thing that was, that means all the stuff that Shaul HaMelech had and David HaMelech inherited, he given it back to Mephibosheth. The second thing that David HaMelech saying to Mephibosheth, that from now on, you're always going to eat on my table. And we'll see what does it mean to eat on my table. And we'll see how David HaMelech actually speaking to Tziva, what's going to happen. Let's go step by step. In verse 8, the prophet tells us, Vayishtahu, Vayomer, Ma avdecha ki panita el hakelev hamet asher kamoni.
Yeah. Mephibosheth was talking. Mephibosheth prostrated himself and said, "What is your servant that you should pay attention to a dead dog such as myself? Oy.
When Mephibosheth heard what kind of kindness David HaMelech going to do with him, he couldn't believe. So he castrated himself in the front of David. What did he say to David HaMelech? Listen what he's saying. He's saying to David HaMelech, I don't understand why you're going to do all of this kindness with a dead dog like me, הכלב המת, אשר לפניך. This dog like me in the front of you. The Targum Yonatan was Yonatan ben Uziel. He was the student of Hillel HaZaken. He lived tens of years before the destruction of the Second Temple. Just for general knowledge. And in his commentary, he said, what does it mean, a dead dog? Why did Mephibosheth use the word dead dog? He said that, what does it mean that Mephibosheth saying to David HaMelech, why did you wasting your time with such an idiot person like me? All of this kindness to an idiot person? Look how Mephibosheth speaking to David. In verse 9, look here what it says. ויקרא המלך אל ציבה, נער שאול, ויאמר אליו, כל אשר היה לשאול ולכל ביתו נתתי לבן אדונך.
The king then called Ziba, Saul's attendant, and said to him, I have given all that belonged to Saul and all of his family to your master's son.
David HaMelech summons Ziba, that he used to be the servant of Shaul. We say, what does mean servant of Shaul? He was in charge about all the other slave, all the other servant in the house of Shaul. And he's saying to him that everything that was belonged to Shaul HaMelech and to his house, I'm giving it, okay, to the son of your master. That means that from now on, everything that I'm going to give back, it belongs to who? To Mephibosheth. The field, all the heritage, everything going back to Mephibosheth. You have to be careful. Watch what I'm telling you. And look what David HaMelech saying to him in verse 10. ועבדת לו את האדמה אשר אתה ובניך ועבדיך והבאת והיה לבן אדונך לחם ואכלו ומפיבושת בן אדונך יאכל תמיד לחם על שולחני ולציווה 15 בנים ו20 עבדים.
He's talking to Ziba at this moment. You shall work the land for him, you and your sons and your servants, and bring in its produce the bread for Micha, the son of your master, Mephibosheth, to eat. But Mephibosheth, son of your master, Jonathan, shall always eat at my table.
What's happening here? David HaMelech telling Ziba.
And Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants.
Shekha, sorry. Thank you very much. David HaMelech now saying and commanding Ziba. And he's saying to him, he said to Ziba, from now on, you're going to make sure that all the field that I'm giving back to Ziba, that I took from Shaul, because I didn't know that he has son, and I was thinking that his daughter Michal now going to inherit. I took it. But now that I found out that Shaul HaMelech have descendants, I'm giving it back to Mephibosheth. And you, Tziva, you have 15 boys, and you have 27. It's your job to make sure that you going to make sure from now on, with your servant, with your kids, that you're looking after all of those fields. Not only that, you're going to make sure that your master all the time will have bread to eat. That means make sure that there is all the time food in the house of Mephibosheth. Why? Because we explained that Mephibosheth couldn't cook. Mephibosheth was a handicap. And then he said to him like this, Ve'eveta. What it mean Ve'eveta? What it mean Ve'eveta? The Malbins explain that you're always going to bring Mephibosheth to my house to eat on my table, we explain. But we have to understand what does it mean Ve'eveta. The Malbin explains something important. He said to come to the king to eat with the king on the table of the king, people really wasn't hungry. People used to eat at home, and they were satisfied that when they come to the house of the king, it's not because they came to eat. It became because they came to show respect to the king. And here, David HaMelech saying to Tziva, make sure that Mephibosheth all the time must have food, at all time, because he's a cripple. He cannot walk. You make sure that you're looking after Mephibosheth, and whatever he needs will be ready for him. And not only that, after you feed him, I want to see Mephibosheth at my table. That means that every day, Tziva have to bring Mephibosheth from his house to deliver him to the house of David to sit with him. Because when people used to sit with David to eat, it's not because they was hungry for a meal. They was full, they already eaten, because it's not nice to eat in the front of the king. So David HaMelech here say, the Malbin, warn Tziva, make sure that Mephibosheth never gonna be hungry, because he can't walk. Okay? And not only that you're gonna be, you have to make sure that you have 15 kids, Tziva, and you have 20 servants. You make sure that nothing is going to be short in the field. You're going to look after the field. You're going to harvest. You're going to plow the ground when it's needed. Anything that need to do, you and your 15 kids and your 27, you're in charge about all of them. In verse 11, ויאמר ציווה אל המלך, ככל אשר יצווה אדוני המלך את עבדו, כן יעשה עבדך, ומביבושת אוכל על שולחני כאחד מבני המלך. Sorry.
And Siva said to the king, according to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so shall your servant do. David repeated, Mephibosheth will be eating at my table like one of the king's sons.
Okay, what's happening here? Mephibosheth here said to David HaMelech, whatever you command, I will do. But then David HaMelech again repeated and saying to Tziva, make sure that Mephibosheth have to be on my table, okay? Like any other members that coming to eat with me. That means every day Mephibosheth has to come to David HaMelech, to his table. And Rabota, if we stop here for a second, we have to understand David HaMelech kept his promise to Yonatan. But David HaMelech teaches also something very important. What is it? Gratitude. That David HaMelech remember what the father of Mephibosheth, Yonatan, done with him. The oaths is one thing. He can look after him. But he doesn't have to bring Mephibosheth to sit with him on a table with all the other advisor, all the other ministers that's sitting with him. David HaMelech teaches not only that he kept his promise, he kept his oath, that it's an obligation. David HaMelech teaches here that we have an obligation of showing Hakarat Tov. A person has to remember Hakarat Tov. That means that David HaMelech showing gratitude to Mephibosheth on all what his father done with him. Let's go to verse 12, one before the last one. ולמפי-בושת בן קטן, ושמו מיכה. וכל מושב בית ציווה עבדים למפי-בושת.
Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. And all of Ziva's household were servants to Mephibosheth.
Okay, pshat of the dvarim that Mephibosheth had a little boy that his name is Micha. Okay, and all the household of Tziva, that means the servant and the 15 sons that he had, they're all servant to Mephibosheth. They have to serve Mephibosheth. The Malbim explained that here that the prophet come to teach us that it was a lot of, what do you call it, that it was an obligation on Mephibosheth to serve, an obligation on Tziva to serve Mephibosheth and to make sure that he's looking for all he needs. What does it mean? We have to understand Mephibosheth was a handicap. He couldn't walk. He needed to be boss, you boss him. You needed to have a shower, you give him a shower. Whatever Mephibosheth need, it was an obligation of Tziva to make sure that it's done. Maybe not by him personally, by his kids or by the other servant. Everything had to be, what do you call it, step by step, ready for Mephibosheth. He needed to be showered, you shower him. He needed to have a bath, you will bath him. He needed to eat, you will make sure that his food is ready. He needed to dress, you're going to dress him. Okay? Here,
Rabbi Levy, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Who was the Siva? Was he a relation of Mephibosheth?
No.
What was he to?
I explained. Siva was a Canaanite servant. He was a servant. He was a servant of King Saul, the grandfather of Mephibosheth.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Canaanite
so here,
slave.
David HaMelech command Siva to make sure that at all time you're looking after Mephibosheth. In verse 13, and with that we're going to end, look what it says. ומפי-בושת יושב בירושלים, כי על שולחן המלך תמיד הוא אוכל, והוא פיסח שתי רגליו.
Mephibosheth dwelled in Jerusalem, for he would always eat at the table of the king, and he was lame in both legs.
Mm-hmm. And we have to understand why is the prophet tell us that number one, Mepiboshet lived in Jerusalem. מה החידוש? What's the חידוש? נכון, דוד המלך lived in עיר דוד, in ירושלים. But why it's so important to tell me that Mepiboshet lived in Jerusalem and he always eaten on a table of David and he was handicapped with both of his legs? The Mefarshim explained to tell you something very important. To live in Yerushalayim, it was the capital. It was too expensive, okay, to live in Yerushalayim. Even today, Yerushalayim is the capital of Eretz Israel. It's very expensive to live there. Come the prophet and say, adore all of that. David HaMelech never, for a moment, with all the expense that it cost him, he make sure that Mepiboshet is going to be next to him, number one. Number two, he makes sure that Siva, the servant, have to bring every day, Mepiboshet to his place. And the prophet say, Vehu ochel, Vehu tamid ochel, and he's always spend the time at the table of David HaMelech. What does it mean ochel? Eating. They came satisfied, but they like to show respect. They used to taste something, okay? Because in the front of the king, you should have a bit of a fear, and you can't just eat like any other one. But the king, the prophet say something very important, and he's a handicap with both of his legs. That means, although that he was a handicap, David HaMelech make sure that Siva, the servant, will fulfill the command that you have to bring Mepiboshet every day. And it's make no difference. Cold, hot, rain, no rain. There is a command, Mepiboshet sitting on my table to eat. When he finish, he's going back to his house. Siva, you have to make sure. Here the prophets come to tell us that you see the quality of David HaMelech. Not only that David HaMelech didn't keep grudge against the descendants of Shaul, he looked after them. He kept his oaths and he done above, because he took an oath to Yonatan, I'm going to look after your family. To look after your family, to provide them, to make sure that they have something to eat, but not necessary that your own kids going to sit on my table to eat with other ministers. Said the Mefarshim that here David HaMelech doing something very important. Not only that he fulfilled his command, the oaths that he took, not only that, David HaMelech makes sure that he's doing extra. What does it mean extra? That every day Tziva have to push on a wheelchair Mepiboshet to the house of David. And not only that, to make sure that Mepiboshet dressed nicely, look nicely, to bring him to the house of the king, to give Mepiboshet a dignity. That Mepiboshet will get a dignity that he can say, listen, I'm sitting in the house of the king every day. I've been invited. What do you learn from here? We have to understand, why is the prophet telling us all of that? Nachon, that the pshat of the dvarim is to say that David HaMelech fulfilled his oath to his father Yehonatan. That's pshat of the dvarim. But David HaMelech here come to teach us that it's not enough. I need to make sure that the son of Yehonatan, Mepiboshet, that is his handicap, not going to be shy. And I'm going to make everything in my authority to try to give dignity to Mephibosheth. And how's David HaMelech done it? By that he commands Siva to bring him every day. It's to make sure that he's clean, to make sure that he's been feeding. Number 3, to put him in the front table of the king with all the other ministers. It's a lot of yichus. Every day. That's what the Mefarshim explained that David HaMelech done the great kindness. And that's the godly kindness that we spoke earlier in a chapter that David HaMelech said to Mephibosheth that he's going to do with him. It's not just to provide for him, to give him servant and to leave him alone and to forget about him. I want to see you every day on my table. I want to make sure that Siva looking after you. I want to make sure that Siva bossing you. I want to make sure that Siva dressing you. I want to make sure that Siva feeding you. And not only that, you're going to sit on my table to give you kavod, honor, and dignity. That's David HaMelech. That's the greatness of David HaMelech. Rabotai, I hope that you enjoyed the shi'ur, that you benefit, and we learn the character trait of David HaMelech. Who was David HaMelech? David HaMelech that came. David HaMelech was a shepherd. Rabotai, 28 years. His brother, his father, thinking, lo alenu, that he's a mamzer. They never allowed him to eat with him on the table. Look at the difference. So David HaMelech knew what does it mean to be strange. He makes sure that Mephibosheth not going to feel it. That's the greatness of David HaMelech.